It still amazes me when I think about it. To be sitting here today, talking about how to recover from depression, when just over 5 years ago, I was standing on a bridge deciding whether or not to take my life. In high school, I got made fun of a lot. I used to, from time to time, think about escaping from life. When I started university, I wanted a fresh start. As I started, my grades dropped and my confidence fell. I didn't make as many friends as I wanted to. When I was heading into my fourth year, I started to get more and more stressed. I started to get moody and more pessimistic. I was pissed off about just the degree I was in, and where I was at with my life. But it wasn't really so much like what I was worried about. It was more just how much stress and how much it was pulling my mood down. That was the real problem. As the months went on, I started to get more physical symptoms. So my stomach was really knotted up. My shoulders were tense, a lot of stress there. My appetite went away. And then my energy and my motivation were going too. But what really did it was when I stopped sleeping, basically. So I could still hide like how I was feeling and how I was doing, but I couldn't really hide being exhausted all the time. And that's what led me to reach out for help. I started by talking to my parents, and then I went and made an appointment with my family doctor. And by that time, it was pretty clear, and it was pretty obvious right away that I was severely depressed. There are a lot of things you can do to treat depression: talk therapy, medication, lifestyle changes. I did everything I could. But it's difficult to motivate yourself from an illness that takes away your motivation. And for example, for exercise, the most I could do was go on short walks around the block with my parents. From the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, I would just be constantly deriding myself and all efforts I made towards recovery. My mood would improve for a couple hours or so, and then it would go back down, and it would go back up a little bit. It was really hard to tell what was going on. And I started thinking about suicide more and more, and it was becoming more something that I thought that I'd probably eventually do, but maybe once my parents had passed away. It went up and down like this for a few more months, and eventually, though, one day it dropped to lower than ever, and I lost all sight of ever getting better, and I also lost all sight of anything enjoyable I'd ever done. That day I switched from thinking about suicide to planning it, and just, I don't know, it was terrifying. I was able to convince myself to sleep on things for one more time, but when I woke up in the morning, I felt worse. And that's what led me to the bridge that day. That's also what led me to leap over the railing. A few minutes before I jumped, I texted my brother. He didn't get his messages very often back then, so I didn't think he was going to see it. But luckily he did, and as I was falling down towards the river, he was already racing into action. When I woke up in the water, I felt doomed to be alive. Before I could really think about it, fear and adrenaline flooded my system, and I started swimming to this platform I saw. When I reached it, I dragged myself out of the water, and then I started yelling for help. And thanks to my brother, it wasn't too long before I heard sirens answering my call. And a emergency crew came on boat and it picked me up. I spent the night in intensive care at the hospital, and I woke up to the news that I had broken 6 ribs, and I had punctured my lung. I had 5 hairline fractures in my vertebrae, several mild brain contusions. But in the hospital, I just felt so many emotions. I was angry and pissed off and filled with hate, but I was also amazed and happy to be alive and to see my family again. And until that time, I really hadn't felt anything positive in so long that even though those emotions didn't last that long, it gave me a glimpse into what it was like to feel well again. And that was kind of a huge turning point for me, and it gave me enough confidence that I knew I could actually recover. My lung took a few weeks to heal, and my back took a few months. But the hardest thing to recover from was depression, to rehab my mind. I restarted the CBT class I was in. I restarted all the lifestyle changes I was working on. I restarted seeing a counselor. I started reading more depression workbooks. I learned some skills in mindfulness that were really helpful in handling intense stress and distressing emotions. And eventually I started seeing a psychiatrist on a longer-term basis. Over the last couple of years as well, I've made a couple adjustments to my medication to get my energy and my mood sort of back on track. But I don't think I can really stress enough just how much all the effort has been worth it. I've had a lot of good times in the last few years. I went back to school, I finished my degree. I've traveled to visit relatives in Australia. I recently went on a trip to Europe with a friend. And none of those things I would have ever thought possible when I was really depressed. I've had some rough patches along the way, but none to the extent of 5 years ago. I haven't had any attempts to take my life since. Part of managing and recovering from depression It's learning to be strong when I feel weakest. And it's learning that no matter how painful those emotions get, that they will pass. In the days and weeks before I tried to kill myself, I believed I was past recovery, but I'm lucky to know I was wrong. A counselor once gave me the most accurate description of depression I've ever heard. He said, "Josh, depression is like torture." And I couldn't agree more. Don't torture yourself, don't kill yourself, and don't think that you can't recover from depression, or that you're not worthy, or that you're not worth the effort, because you are, and recovery is. Trust in your ability to recover, be relentless in your efforts towards reaching it, and fight depression with as many people as you can get on your side.